Good morning everyone, how's it going today? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're doing an MCP Servers crash course, okay? So the idea is that by the end of this video you will understand everything that you need to know about how to use MCP servers and how to create your own, okay? So this is what we're going to be doing. First, in less than 10 minutes, we're going to be covering what is MCP so that you understand actually the theory behind it and the agentic workflow that takes place in it. After that, we're going to be creating our own server using Python, and the server that we're going to be creating is one that will allow our AI assistants to check the latest documentation of the library that we are using before actually suggesting code to us, okay? So that the code that our AI assistant suggests to us is always up to date. And then we're going to be seeing how to use that server that we just created in both Claude Desktop and in Claude Code, okay? We're going to walk you through everything on how to set this up because sometimes it's a little bit tricky. And then we're also going to show you how to debug these MCP servers because that's also a little bit tricky if you want to debug them. It's not just like running the function. So there you go. That's what we're going to be doing today. As usual, feel free to drop a like and subscribe if you like these kind of videos. And let's get right into it. All right, so let's start this off by going over what an agent is. If you are already familiar with how an agent works, feel free to skip to the part of the video where I talk about how this affects the MCP servers. But if you're not, it really just takes a couple of minutes, don't worry. We're going to go over it really quick. And it's actually important to understand how an agent works because pretty much all of the LLM applications that you currently use are actually agents. So ChatGPT, Claude, Klein, Cursor, all of those use agents. They're not just calling the LLM once. And to understand what an agent is itself, it's very straightforward. An agent is essentially a loop of calls to a language model that simulate a thought process, okay? A chain of thought. So in this way, when you send a query to your agentic framework, it enters this loop that you see right here. It starts with a thought, then it already knows, because of its system prompt, the available actions that it can take. This can be functions, usually just API calls or anything. And then the observation is the result of that, of executing that action, okay? So this kind of tries to emulate when you articulate the thoughts in your head before acting. So let's say that, for example, you're making a cake and at some point you need the milk, but you don't have it with you. So you're like, okay, so I don't have it here. Oh, it has to be in the fridge. I'm going to go to the fridge. And then you go to the fridge. So that articulation of the thought led you to actually perform the action. I know that's not always how it works, but in an agent, it's very useful to use a language model to simulate that thought and then then choose the action from the tools that it has available that we have specified in the system prompt. And then once the application executes the action, the observation is when you send the output of that execution to the LLM, and then it can start thinking again. So let's say that, for example, let's say that you give your agent a tool that allows it to read your email. So if you ask your agent, hey, give me a summary of my email, it will be like, okay, so I have to check the summary of the email. So I have to check the emails, the latest emails in the inbox. And there's a tool that reads the latest emails in the inbox. Then the observation is going to be the returned value of that, which is going to be the actual content of the emails. And now we can go back to the thinking part, and the agent's going to be like, okay, so now I have the emails, now I'm going to summarize them, and now it can output the summary to the user. Okay, that's essentially all that's going on. And this is just another way of showing this. So you have the user query that enters this thought loop. Then if it has to use a tool, it uses the tool. Then it returns the observation. If it has to use the tool again, it uses the tool and returns the observation. And then if by the end it already has the response, it gives you the response, okay? That's essentially how an agent works. And that is why it is useful, MCP servers, because the idea behind an MCP server is that here you have a toolkit But imagine that this toolkit, you could have multiple toolkits and they all have the same input-output protocol. So now everyone can create their own toolkits, and you can just switch them over and be like, okay, so now I want to use this other toolkit, or now I want to use the two of them. And your agent is going to be able to choose which one to use, okay? So that's essentially how an agent works and how it relates to the MCP servers. Now let's actually take a look at how the MCP servers work. Okay, so now that we have understood how an agent works, now it's actually way easier to understand how an MCP server works, because essentially every single server is going to be treated as a toolbox in this case. So here we have a documentation toolbox that is going to allow us to search. I mean, in this example, we have a documentation toolbox that is going to allow us to search for the documentation of a given library, for example. Here we have another toolbox that is going to allow us to read email and send emails, and this one itself is going to be another MCP server, and this one right here is going to be another server that allows you to search the web, okay? And the idea right here is that this AI assistant can be pretty much any assistant that you want. So this one can be ChatGPT, Claude, or any assistant that you wrote if you make it compatible with the MCP protocol. And that's actually the kind of revolutionary part right here, is that all of this is possible because we have this MCP protocol right here. So I have the protocol. And the idea of this is that you can use this MCP protocol to connect to all of these servers. And as long as you make your application compatible with the MCP protocol, it has access to the servers that people are going to be developing themselves, even if they are not at all related to your application, okay? So that's kind of the new thing. Now let me actually show you the actual diagram that is the one that is shown by the guys at Anthropic. And this is what we actually finally get to. So we have the MCP client, which is the one that you have to create for your application. So if you have your chat application, your chatbot, your assistant, whatever, you can use the MCP SDK to make it compatible with the MCP protocol. And now it is going to be able to connect to all the servers, MCP servers, that are essentially these toolboxes for specialized tools and specialized features that you can add to your server. So, I mean, and to be clear, your servers can can give your assistant access to, of course, tools like we saw before, but they can also give it access to custom prompts and to resources themselves, like, for example, markdown files, etc., that can be useful for documentation, for example, okay? So now that we have understood how an MCP server works, let's actually create our own. All right, so what we're going to be building right here is essentially this server that you see right here. We're not going to be adding this resource like this. We're just going to be creating this tool, and we're going to be adding it to an MCP server that we're going to start and that we're going to use with our Claude Desktop application and also with Claude Code, okay? And the idea right here is that usually when you use an LLM to help you code, you have the common problem that it does not know about the latest releases of the libraries that you're using. So for example, if you're using LangChain or LaMdaIndex, maybe there were some updates to the library a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago, and that naturally is not within the pre-trained material that trained the language model. So they will not be aware of that. So an alternative to this is that you create this MCP server that allows your coding assistant to go look for the latest documentation before answering a question or before generating a code suggestion for the given library that you're using, okay? And that's what we're going to be building right now. So let's actually start doing that. Okay, so what we're going to be building first is, let's just start by setting up our environment. All the commands that I'm going to be using right here are actually in the blog post and the description, so feel free to check that out. And so the first thing is that actually the guys at Anthropic, they recommend using UV as a package manager, and I've actually been using it for a few days now. It's amazing. I really like it. It's kind of like pip, but faster. So feel free to use that one if you want. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to initialize our project. And in this case, I'm going to call my project documentation. Okay, so I go uv init documentation. And after that, I am essentially just going to go into my documentation and open it with cursor. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so as you can see, this has created our project right here with a very quick git ignore, path inversion. We have our main entry point file and basically just the starting point of the entire thing. Okay, now let's actually continue with the setup. Just going to open my terminal right here. And let's do a couple of things first. First thing, we're going to have to create our virtual environment. And there you go. Now it's created right here. So what I'm going to do is just activate it. And there you go. Now I have my virtual environment working within here. And next thing is you're going to have to install these dependencies. So I'm going to be using, let me just give it more space right here. I'm going to be using the MCP CLI and the httpx library to make the calls to Google, which is what we're going to be using to search for the documentation. Okay, so I execute this. There you go. And now I have pretty much everything I need. Now I can actually start building my MCP server. All right, so let's start actually building our server. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to import FastMCP from MCP Server FastMCP. And this is the one that we're actually going to be using to initialize our server. Okay, and there we go. So then we just do MCP equals FastMCP and we name it. In this case, I'm just going to name it docs like this. And there we go. We're also going to be needing some API keys. So I'm going to be just importing from .tnv. Let me just copy it from here. From .tnv, I'm going to import load.tnv, and then I'm just going to run it before anything else happens right here. Okay. And there we go. Then we're just going to initialize a few constants. The first one, actually the only one that we're going to be using is this one, the US user agent. And let's actually also initialize the Serper URL like this. Okay, and this one we're going to paste it a little bit later when we see how Serper works. And just to give you an idea of what the whole thing that we're going to be building, we're going to be building 3 methods right here, 3 functions. The first one is going to be search web. So search web. This one is essentially going to allow us to, this one's going to return the web results from a Google search. Then we're going to, let me just put like this. We're also going to be creating another one called fetch URL. And this one is going to get us the results from just to scrape a URL and to get the actual contents of it. And then we're actually going to get the get docs, which is actually going to be the tool that we're going to be building. Okay. And this one is going to be decorated with mcp.tool like this. And this is the one that the agent is going to be able to call. And this one is going to first search the web to find the relevant documentation pages for our library. And then we're going to fetch those pages to actually get the contents. And actually, in order to do that, we're going to have to use a quick little hack of YouTube that allows us to check only search results from a given URL, and we're going to give it this URL for Python, this URL for Llama Index, and this URL for OpenAI. Okay, you're going to see how that works in just a moment, but let's actually first take a look at how Serper works to show you how to create this search web function right here. All right, and just a quick showcase of what we're going to be using to build this. We're going to be searching the documentation using Google. And in order to do this, we're going to be using Serper. It's essentially just Google within an API, and it gives you 2,500 free queries when you start your first account. We can see that I've been testing it a little bit. And essentially, let me just show you how it works. So you just send a query, and it sends the query within the payload right here under the queue parameter, and then you send that to this URL right here. And then you just send it all to this endpoint, and it returns to you the results. So if we search for Apple, I'm going to get actually just say 3 results per query. There you go. Oh, I can only get 10 here in the playground. All right. So there you go. I send this, and then I get from this organic results, these are the ones that I'm actually interested in, I get the actual results from my Google search, okay? And actually what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be appending it or prepending it with site and then the URL of where I want to search for the documentation. So here, if I want to say, for example, I want to look for ChromaDB right here. Now, all of my results are going to be from this URL, langchain.com/docs. So now I am sure that I'm getting actually the latest documentation from LangChain. And the same goes for Llama Index. Say, for example, if you wanted to search for this thing on Llama Index only, I can prepend this with this. And now all the results actually come from docs Llama Index stable. So I'm sure that this documentation is going to be up to date. And the idea right here is that I'm going to have my agent first perform the search and then go through the link that's listed right here and actually get the results using BeautifulSoup. Okay. So let's actually first get our API keys. I'm going to copy it, and then I am going to paste it right here into my .dnv file that I'm just going to create. And I'm going to say Serper API key. I'm just going to paste it right here. And now I'm going to actually be able to use it with my load.dnv file right here. And now we're ready to actually start coding. Actually, one thing I forgot is to copy this URL right here. Now we can actually start creating this search web function. All right, so now let's actually start creating these 2 helper functions that we're going to be using, okay? So as a reminder, our agent is going to first search the web for the query that it requests, and then use those search results to actually access the URL of the search results and get the contents, okay? So this one gets the contents of the URL, and this one gets the results in the form of a URL, okay? So let's first do the search web function. It's going to take a query that is going to be a string, like this. A string, and it's going to return a dictionary or none, okay? Let me just copy and paste this one right here, because this is not exactly, this is not a video about how to create a search web function. So there we go. As you can see, we're using async in here, so I'm going to do async too, and I'm going to have to also import httpx, JSON, and OS for this to work. So just to go over this very quickly, I initialize the payload and I send the query. So this search web function is essentially just going to search the web for any query that I send to it. And it is going to return a number of 2. It's going to return 2 results only. Okay, so I'm just going to be focusing on the top 2 results. The headers, the first header that it takes is my API key. And then we have the content type right here as well. And secondly, we're going to initialize this async client, and we're going to call our Serper API using this. And actually the URL is going to be my Serper URL right here. And there we go. My headers, we send my data, and then I just set a timeout of 30 seconds as well. And there we go. Then we just response trace for status, and then return the JSON object as a dictionary. Okay, that's all that we're doing with this search web function. So essentially just returns our search results in a dictionary. And I'm going to do the same thing with the fetch URL. It's essentially just the same thing, but instead of using Serper, it just sends a GET request to my URL and gives me the results, and then I just parse them using BeautifulSoup, okay? Again, I am using async here, so I'm just going to async it like this, and I'm going to have to import BeautifulSoup too. So there we go. I essentially just send this GET request, and then I parse it with BeautifulSoup, and now I just get the text and return only the text of the URL. Okay, so what my agent is going to do when it calls this get docs function, it is going to first search the web, get two results in the form of the title and the URL of the search result. And then we're going to open the URL using the fetch URL, and it's going to return by the end only the results of the two top results on Google that come from a given library documentation. Okay, so there we go. That's our helper functions. We can now start actually coding the get documentation tool. All right. All right, so now it's time to actually start creating the tool. Now, very importantly, you have to create, to create your tool that your agent is going to be able to use, you have to decorate it with this decorator right here, which is mcp.tool, okay? And this essentially is going to convert the function definition that you're doing right now into an actual tool that is compatible with the MCP protocol, okay? And importantly, I'm just going to add here my parameters. As we mentioned before, we're going to be taking the URL and the query. Something extremely important that you have to do when you initialize a tool for any agent, but I mean, of course, right now for MCP, is that you have to add a doc string specifying very clearly what your tool does. This is the description that is going to appear to the user when they see the MCP server that is connected. And also, this is going to be the description that is available for your LLM, your language model, to see what this tool actually does and to select it when it is useful. Because if your doc string is not specific enough, your agent or your application, your language model, is not going to be able to use it. So here, as you can see, I specified that this one is the search, allows you to search for the documentation of a given for a given query and library. And for now, it supports LangChain, OpenAI, and Llama Index, as I mentioned up here. Okay. Now, the arguments also specify them very importantly, because these are going to be parsed as arguments for the function call of your language model, and then the actual returned value. And here, it's not actually going to return a list of dictionaries. It's going to return the text from the documentation. Okay. And let's actually start by doing this. So I am going to just right now, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to test if the library that was passed right here is actually within the supported libraries that I have right here, okay? If it is not in, if it is not in that library, I'm just going to raise an error. And then I'm going to build the query that we're going to be sending, okay? Remember, as I mentioned before, we're going to be using site, colon, and then the actual URL where we're going to be searching, and then the actual query from the language model that wants to, for whatever documentation it wants to find. And then I am just going to get the results right here from the search web helper tool, helper function that I had right here. Now I'm using await right here, so I'm just going to have to turn this into an async function. And there you go. Let's see what this does. Now, if there are no results, I'm just going to return results not found. And then for every single one of those results, I'm going to tap into the result URL link. If you remember correctly, that's what the results look like. If I show you again right here, if I go to the results, I go to the organic part, and then I go to the link. This is what we are going to try to fetch actually here. Yeah, we're looping through the organic part, and then for each one of those, we're tapping into the link one, and we're fetching the URL, which, remember, with BeautifulSoup, it returns just the text of that page. And then instead of printing this, we are going to be adding them to a dictionary. So the text is going to be like this, and then we just return the text like that, okay? So there you go. Now we have the tool that's working correctly, and we have that it is already returning all the text from the documentation, which is going to be added. It's going to be returned by the tool, and it's going to be added to our language model function call, okay? So there we go. Now, last thing to do is to come right here to if name equals main, and we're going to do mcp.run like this. mcp.run and transport equals st standard input output. And then we save this, and now we have actually completely finished our MCP server. It was that easy. I mean, you can of course have your coding assistant write it for you, but I just wanted you to understand how this is all working. So essentially, the tool is the one that is going to be called, and you're able to have as many helper functions as you want, and as many tools as you want as well. All right. So let's actually run this and connect it to our Claude Desktop application, okay? All right, so a quick little thing that I wanted to mention before actually showing you how this works in Claude is that I actually do not have a Plus subscription to Claude because I do everything with the API. So this tool is probably not going to work with the free version because it returns the entire contents of 2 different web pages, and that's a lot for that's a lot of context for the free tier of the Claude Desktop app. So if you have a Plus subscription to Claude, this should work perfectly. If not, then you probably want a Plus subscription if you want to use this with Claude Desktop. That being said, for the demo, I am actually going to be mocking the response with a shorter response, just to make sure that it fits within the context window of Claude Desktop, okay? And after that, I'm going to show this to you on Claude Code, and for that, I'm actually going to be using the real tool, just to show you that, because that one works with the API, okay? So let's actually show this on Claude Desktop and then on Claude Code. All right, so what I'm going to show you right now is how to use this MCP server that we just created with Claude, okay? And we're going to be using Claude Desktop for this in order for actually be able to handle this. And the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to go to Settings, Developer, Edit Configuration, and it's going to show you this JSON file. Now you're going to edit it with any text editor you want. I'm going to be using Sublime here. And under MCP servers, you're going to paste the configuration for your server, okay? Now, in my case, I created my server in Python, so I'm going to be using UV to run it. There is a common error sometimes when you do not add the entire binary. So if you just do, if you set as command UV, this may raise an error depending on your path, but there you go. I mean, we can take a look at this in a moment. So you're going to add the command to actually run your server, which is UV. Then you're going to move your terminal to the directory where you'll build your server. In my case, this is, let me show you, this is this one right here. PUID is print working directory, by the way. So you copy this, you come right here, and you, right here, I'm going to paste the full directory of where your server is located. Then you're going to add run and main.py, which is the name of our file where our server is, okay? This is essentially telling Claude to run the server at start, okay? So I'm going to save this. I'm going to go back to Claude. I'm going to open it again, restart it. As you can see, we have these errors, and most of the time, the reason for this is that your Claude is not finding the binary for UV. So what I want to do is I want to find which UV I am using here, where I was actually using it and it was working. So I'm just going to copy the actual full path to the binary. I'm going to go back to my Claude config file, and instead of just saying UV, I'm going to add the entire binary path right here. So now I can close this and I can restart Claude. And there you go. So as you can see, now I have this little hammer right here, which if I click it, I see the list of the tools that my Claude Desktop has available for me right now. So in order to use these tools, I can just go right here and ask Claude for a question that will likely use these tools. So for example, how do I implement a chroma DB in LangChain? And as you can see, it's going to try to run this tool. It's going to ask me for my permission to actually run the tool. It's calling library in the query, then it got the answer, just tries to run it a few times, and there you go. There you go. So now it is actually answering the question, and it is actually giving me the implementation to do it using the latest documentation from LangChain and Chroma. So there you go. Now this works correctly. Let me show you how this looks. So Chroma DB implementation, and now you have the result is this, the answer right here on the actual documentation. So there you go. And that's how you do this with Claude Desktop. Now let's actually take a quick look at how to do this with Claude Code, and then let's check some debugging. All right, so now I'm back here at my IDE, and to actually run this MCP server with Claude Code. Okay, so what we're going to be doing first is I'm going to be removing this mock tool result to actually use the real tool, and what I'm going to do is add it to Claude Code first. Okay, so I'm going to do Claude Code to show you that I currently don't have any tools or any MCP servers running. I'm going to close this. And in order to add it, what we're going to be doing first is we're going to do Claude MCP add. Okay, and this is going to open an interactive helper to actually add the MCP server, or if you know the parameters, you can just add them right here. Okay, I'm going to open the interactive tool, and it asks me to create a server name. I'm going to call it documentation, docs, because it's going to look for the latest documentation. The project is going to be the local one, and enter a command to start my MCP server. Okay, so in my case, I wrote this MCP server in Python, so I'm going to be using UV to run it. However, remember that sometimes if you just do UV, it may do some errors. So I'm going to check where my binary for my UV is. So I'm going to paste the entire binary. And then for the parameters, remember, just like with Claude Desktop, we're going to do directory, and then we're going to paste the working directory where my server is. So I'm going to come right here, I'm going to paste this, then we're going to run the actual main.py file that we have right here. Okay, and the main.py file is the one naturally where my server is coded. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter. For the environment variables, I am using some environment variables, but I don't have to add them here because I have already loaded them in my .env file. I'm going to leave this empty. Just check that everything is correct. Directory, etc. documentation. I can confirm this and just hit enter to finish. And if you want to check the MCP servers running on that you have on Claude, you can do MCP list, Claude MCP list, and you will see that your new server is here just added. And now if I run Claude, you can see that I have my docs right here. Okay, so everything seems to be working correctly. Now I'm actually going to test it. So let's ask it to create a new function that implements a Chroma DB database, vector database with LangChain, and make sure to use the latest integration. Let's run this, and hopefully it's going to use my tool. So let's see if it actually does it. It actually used the tool, and this is the results from my tool. I had actually already tested this before, and it asked me to validate this, and I validated that I wanted to do it. So if this is the first time that you're running this tool, it is going to ask you for the validation if you actually want to run the tool. So I'm going to say yes to everything, to all the changes that it wants to do, just to show you, instead of actually having to validate every single thing. And as you can see, it's now thinking, and it used the tool that I added to it, and it's using the latest now documentation from LangChain to perform this integration. Okay, I'm gonna cut the video right now and get back when it's finished to show you the final result. Okay, that was actually quite fast. So it says that I've created a comprehensive implementation, blah, blah, blah. And as you can see, it used the tool that I asked it to use, get docs, and the query was Chrome integration with LangChain, and this is what it got, okay? Now if I close this, I can come back to my main.py and see that actually there's this new tool, create Chrome vector store, okay? So there you go. That's how you use this with Claude Code. Now, what I want to show you afterwards is how to debug this, because I mean sometimes when you're building this, you can encounter errors, and that's normal. So let me just show you how to debug this. All right. So in order to show you how to debug this, I'm going to go back to the previous state of my MCP server, which is the one that I developed right here, and save this. And actually, let me just close Claude Code. So you can see that costed me 14 cents for just one query. So not the most affordable AI assistant, but there you go. So now what I want to do is I want to open npx. You're going to run this like this right here. Let me show you. Like this. So you're going to do npx at model context protocol /inspector, and then you're going to run your server within it. Okay. So in other words, in this particular case, my server is on main.py. And remember that in order to run it, you do uv run and then the file of your server. And in this case, it is uv run main.py. So I'm going to enter this, and it's going to open my inspector on localhost 5173. So here I now open my inspector, as you can see. And this is essentially just a tool that allows you to debug your MCP server. So now you can do uv is the command, the arguments of this. Now I can do connect. Now I'm connected to my server. As you remember from the explanation, you can add resources, prompts, etc. to your MCP servers, but in this case, we're focusing on the tool side. So in order to check the tools, you go to tools and list the available tools that your server has right here. And as you can see, here's the tool that I created. So you open it, and here you can actually start testing it. So the query, what's going to be the query? Let's say that in my case, it's going to be ChromaDB, and the library that I want to check for is, say, llama index. And this naturally comes from the fact that I have support for this right here in my documentation URLs. And then I can run the tool, and I can check the results right here. And this is what is going to be shown to my language model when it calls this this tool. So I can see that it's working correctly. Just a very straightforward way to test your MCP server tools, because they're not as straightforward to run in a notebook or in the script itself, because it's using the MCP decorators. So this is a way to test them, and it's very reliable and very, very neat way to actually check that your MCP server is working correctly. Okay, so there you go. So there you go. We have successfully finished the video. We explained at the beginning what is MCP exactly and how it works. We created our own MCP server using Python. In the future, maybe we can make a video about how to do this using Node in JavaScript. We connected it to both Claude Desktop and Claude Code, and we also learned how to debug it real quick. So that's it for this video. Feel free to subscribe if you want more videos like this. Feel free to drop a like. And also feel free to check out the bootcamp the AI engineering bootcamp that I set up. The link is also in the description to take you from zero to hero in the AI engineering world. Okay. So drop any questions in the comments, and I will see you next time.